וימים בפסייתו ובקים בגופיו. הבן לא יתפתח שזל תמיד החטאים שכאלה משלם לה, והמשיח מתקרב אז כדאי שתאמינו שיש לנו רק אל אחד. יש לנו רק אל אחד בעולם, וימלוך לבן בחוכמה ואהבה רעה. יש לנו רק אל אחד, יש לנו רק אל אחד בעולם, וימלוך לבן בחוכמה ואהבה רעה. יש לנו רק אל אחד. שכוכבים עוד לא חלפו והעולם היה שחור.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. I love saying that. I only get to say it once a week. Wouldn't it be nice if you could say Shabbat Shalom every day? Shabbat Shalom.
Amen.
The sages talk about a time that will be all Shabbat. Be all Shabbat. You know, today we're going to be talking from the portion, the Parsha Shoftim, and Shoftim comes from Deuteronomy, chapter 16, verse 18, until 21, chapter 21, verse 9. So it spans a few different chapters. And we're going to be talking today about the prophet like Moses. I know there's been a lot of talk. There's probably been a lot of sermons on this, a lot of teachings on this. And today we're going to attempt to unpack this. If there's any images on the screen today that you would like to have, you can either snap them yourself with your phone or just ask me after the service. I'd be happy to send them to you. PDF or whatever form you like. So we're going to be concentrating here on the scriptures that were read today in the Hebrew. We're going to be focusing today on Deuteronomy 18, but we'll be skipping all over the Bible through the prophets into the New Covenant to show things. We're going to be unpacking Hebrew text, Greek text for you. So, as I mentioned earlier, the Parsha is called Shoftim. Shoftim is a plural word. It means judges. Shoftim. But however, some of the sages have translated the word to mean police or officers, because only the high judges made rulings. Lower judges were seen as kind of policemen or officers in that they would carry out mandates from the princes of the tribes or their leaders, or perhaps the judges of their time during the time of the judges. You know, I don't think if Moses wanted somebody rounded up, he didn't go do it himself. He sent people. These would be called Shoftim. So there's multiple uses for the word. So let's take a better look at it. But before I get started today, I have a humorous story. Some of you may have heard this story before, and if you haven't, I hope you enjoy it as I did the first time I heard it. So there's a story about former President Bush, George W. Bush, is in an airport, and he has a chance meeting in an airport with this man with long flowing white robe and with long white beard and white hair, and the man had a staff in one hand, okay, and 2 stone tablets in the other hand. And President Bush is looking at him, former President Bush is looking at him, and he got very excited, so he approached the man and he said, "Are you Moses?" And the man completely ignored the former president and started staring at the ceiling. Well, the president positioned himself more directly into the man's view, and he said again, "Aren't you Moses?" And the man continued to look up to the ceiling, actually changed his position to turn his back on the president. So the president tugged at the man's sleeve and asked once again, "Aren't you Moses?" And finally, the man responded in an irritated voice, "Yes, I am." The president asked him why he was so uppity. And Moses replied, "The last time I spoke to a bush, I had to spend 40 years in the desert." You know, the Parsha Shoftim, really, if you add up, there's a lot of different pieces about it. It's a lot of different pieces about it. But if you add it all up, it really comes down to one word. All those chapters we talked about. And the one word is tzedek. Tzedek is often translated as justice. Sometimes it's translated as righteousness. I guess probably the best translation would be righteous justice. Because justice in today's world is not always righteous, but righteous justice. Now, tzedek is a Hebrew word translating into English, as I said, best is righteous justice. And in Parsha Shoftim, in Deuteronomy 16, verse 20, near the beginning of the Parsha, of the portion, we can see a very interesting quote. Comes right from Deuteronomy 16, verse 20. It says, "Tzedek, tzedek tirdof." Justice, justice shall you pursue. Also, we could say, righteous justice shall you pursue. God wants us not just to recognize it, to see it, and to do it, but to pursue it, to run after it. And I'm going to skip over to the New Covenant here for a second. And, Paul, Saul of Tarsus, writes in his first letter to Timothy, in 1 Timothy 6, verse 11, he says, "But you, as a man of God, flee from these things, and pursue righteousness, godliness, faithfulness, love, steadfastness, and gentleness." And the Greek word here translated here as righteousness, here I have it in red, that the Greek word is dikaiosyne. Dikaiosyne is a Greek word that means righteousness, and it has an expanded definition from the Greek. It means the condition acceptable to God, the doctrine concerning the way in which man may attain a state approved of God. Integrity, virtue, purity of life, rightness, correctness of thinking, feeling, and acting. That's a whole lot to tie into one word. And as with the example of the humorous story of President Bush and Moses, being a tzedek, being a righteous person, is a hard task in today's world. It's a narrow gate which leads to God. And people may ask a question, how can a person pursue tzedek? How can a person pursue righteous justice? God commands us. Deuteronomy 16:20. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Righteousness, righteousness shall you pursue. Justice, justice shall you pursue. How can we pursue this? In the days of Moses, Israel had but to heed the teachings of Moses, and they would be right on the track. Just listen to Moses, can't go wrong. But what about us? What about right here? What about now? What about today? What about in this room? What about in this city, in this world? You and I. Did Moses leave us a clue? A way to pursue justice and righteousness? Yes, he did. The sacred text given to Israel is the record of revelation. I'll say that again. The sacred text given to Israel is the record of revelation left to us by the prophets. In Judaism, the greatest of the prophets is Moses. Most of you know this. And so the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, is considered the greatest source of revelation from God to man, like in Judaism, right? So, but yet, the Torah itself speaks of another prophet. The prophet like Moses who is to come. Deuteronomy 18 and 9 says, 19, sorry, we pursue justice, missed that slide, here we go. I will raise up a prophet like you for them among their brothers. I will put my words in his mouth, and he will speak to them all that I command him. Now whoever does not listen to my words that this prophet speaks in my name, I myself will call him to account. This is serious business. Let's explore this together. The prophet like Moses. The prophet like Moses. Not ready for that yet. The prophet like Moses. Moses' prophecy of Messiah in Deuteronomy 18:15, just a few verses earlier than what we just read, it says this. It says, Navi mikir becha me'ahecha kamoni yakim lecha Adonai Elohecha elav tishma'un. What am I saying here, rather than you trying to decipher it? It says, Adonai, the Lord, your God, will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your brothers. Don't forget that part. From your brothers. It is to him you shall listen. That's in the Torah of Moses. It's not New Covenant. It's not in the prophets. It's not in the book of Revelation. It's in the Torah of Moses. You got 4 books. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. In those 4 books, Moses is taking instructions from God and relaying them. But the tone in the book of Deuteronomy changes a little bit, and Moses is kind of giving instructions here. He's received the revelation from God, and now he's in the midst of giving his final sermon, his last message, his final and last message. In this Parsha, we find the only passage in the entire 5 books of Moses where Moses explicitly identifies himself as a prophet of the Lord. He's never done that before. Finally here, he identifies himself as a prophet. We'll raise up a prophet for you like me. He's telling them, I'm a prophet. Moreover, this is also the only passage where Moses identified the coming of the Messiah as a prophet like me. Deuteronomy 18:15 and John 6:14, it's repeated. I want to notice further that the coming prophet must be born of Israel. I'm going to get into that a little bit later even more, but it says from your brothers. In the New Covenant, we read that the Sopharim, or scribes, had sent a delegation to question Yochanan, John the Baptist, and asking him 2 questions. They asked him 2 questions, right? Is this John 1:21? Yeah. Yes? No? Okay. Yeah, I don't know what to do. Okay. Flash dance. So, they said, then who are you? They asked him. Are you Eliyahu? Are you Elijah? No, I'm not, he said. Are you the prophet, the one we're expecting? No, he replied. Are you Elijah? This referred to the prophecy of Malachi. It's not Malachi, the Italian prophet, Malachi. So Malachi's prophecy in Malachi chapter 4, verse 5, is a prophecy that Elijah would come as a messenger or a herald before the appearance of the Messiah. Elijah comes first, Messiah comes after. If Elijah is there, you know Messiah is coming. And to this day, Jews all around the world, and most of you know this if you've been to a Passover Seder, experienced this, you know that Jews around the world set up a cup of wine for Elijah at the Passover Seder table in anticipation of the arrival as the forerunner of the Messiah. They're waiting for him to come. Him they'll know, they say. And let me deviate from my text here. No, let me explain this, then I'll go into a little story. Are you the prophet? They ask him next. Are you the prophet, the one that we are expecting? He said, no. This referred directly to Moses' prophecy that God would send a prophet like me, Deuteronomy 18. And we further read that when Philip encountered Nathanael in John 1:45, he says this. He says, Philip says, we have found him whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Yeshua min Nazareth ben Yosef, Yeshua of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. We found him. You know the one Moses was talking about? He's right here. We found him. After Yeshua fed the 5,000, the people began to ask if this was the prophet who is to come into the world. Is this the prophet who is to come into the world? And Peter identified Yeshua as the prophet in Acts 3:22-23. It says, Moses said, the Lord God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brothers. They're repeating here from Deuteronomy 18. You shall listen to him in whatever he tells you. And it shall be that every soul who does not listen to that prophet shall be destroyed from the people. You see, Peter here is identifying Yeshua as that prophet. This is the one that was to come. He's saying, this is Yeshua, this is him. And in his speech before the Shinedrin, the Sanhedrin, Stephen declared that Yeshua was the promised Messiah. He said, this is that Moses who said to the children of Israel, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brethren. Him you shall hear. That's Acts 7:37-38. Here, and let me, before I get into my 18 insights, I want to do this because I've labeled today Shabbat Chai. Why? That's my own invention. Here's why. Chai means life. Today is the 18th day, right? It's 8/18/18. Isn't that a little settling for you? And as soon as the sun sets, the date becomes, the Hebrew date is Elul 8. There's a lot of 8s and 18s going on. What is 18? 18 is, in Hebrew, the number is spelled with letters. And when you say the two letters together, it spells Chai. Chai is Hebrew for life. Shabbat Chai. Sometimes, well, back in my day, I don't know what they do today. When I was a young man, I had to bar mitzvah. I became a bar mitzvah. And I got a lot of checks that were for $36, and I asked, I asked my parents, why $36? It's 50, 25, 36, and they said, you're in yeshiva, don't you know? So I went and I asked the rabbi, and the rabbi said that 36 was double chai. It meant life twice. You heard of people getting a double life sentence for prison? This is a double life sentence for living. I want you to have a double life. Not two different lives, but to live as long as you could and then another one on top of it. To have long life. Double chai, double life. It's 36 instead of 18. So, we talked about Elijah, the prophet. Are you Elijah? No. Are you the prophet who was to come? No. It's an interesting little tale. Some of you may have heard this before, others may not have. But there's an interesting little tale, and it's supposedly takes place hundreds of years ago in the former Soviet Union area. It was a village of Jewish people there, and they were, kind of right out of Fiddler on the Roof kind of thing. All kind of different people and personalities. And one day, this man, he was extremely troubled. He was grief-stricken and went to see the rabbi, and he said, Rabbi, I don't care what I have to do. I'm very, very wealthy. I will pay anything I have, everything I have. I must speak with Elijah the prophet. You must arrange this for me. And the rabbi said, please stop wasting my time. Get out of here. So he left. And a week later he came back. He said, Rabbi, I've done everything. I prayed. I fasted. I've done everything. I need to speak with Elijah the prophet now. I must speak with Eliyahu. Nothing else will give peace to my heart. And the rabbi says, please, you've been here before. Please go away. You're wasting my time. I'm doing God's business here. You know, sei gesund. So another week goes by. The rich man comes back and he says, Rabbi, please, I'll do anything. I'll build you a new synagogue. Anything you ask, please. I must see Elijah the prophet. I must speak to him. It has to be now. It's life and death. And so the rabbi says, I'll tell you what you do. I want you to go get your finest horse and your carriage. I want you to go into town and load it with provisions for the best Shabbat meal that has ever been given, fit for a king. Load it up, and I want you to take the narrow path that goes to the north out of town. I want you to follow the winding road all the way out. Follow it for 20 miles. Around the end of that, you're going to see a small cabin. That is where you will find Elijah the prophet. He did exactly as the rabbi said. He loaded it up with the finest wines, fruits, vegetables, chicken, goose, turkey. I mean, he had it, it looked like Thanksgiving on steroids. He was ready to have a Shabbat dinner that King David went, wow, for me? So, and he goes out there and he sees, as he goes through the 20 miles, and he sees this small, more of a shack than a cabin. And he gets off his horse, and he gets off the wagon, and he gets down, he ties up the horse, and he knocks on the door, expecting to see Elijah the prophet answer. He knocks on the door, and an older man answers the door, and he thinks, I wonder if this is him. And he's dressed very poorly. His clothes have holes, tattered. They look like they're falling off of him. They're very, very, very poor and old-looking clothing. And he looks around and he sees the man, what looks like his wife, and some children around the table. And so they said, are you here for Shabbos? Are you here for Shabbat? And he says, I guess I am. I brought some things. He's still wondering, what's going on? The rabbi told me to come here. So the family said, really? And the only thing on the table was a candle, a crust of bread, and there was some soup over the fire. That was their Shabbat dinner. There was barely enough to feed the two children, the mother and the father. When they went out and he opened his carriage and they saw all of these things, they were leaping for joy. And they helped him unload. It took them a while. They had the greatest Shabbat dinner in their life with leftovers. Shabbat meal ended. The prayers had ended. It's late into the evening. Still no Elijah. He doesn't know what is going on. So he says, maybe I'm supposed to spend the night. Elijah will wake me. So they make a bed for him, and he stays the night. He wakes up in the morning. No Elijah. They make him a Shabbat breakfast, and they do some prayers and things. And then, Shabbat is just about over. It's time for him to end. So, he gets his coat on, he puts his boots on, and he goes outside. But it was raining. It's very muddy out there. And as he leaves, and they say goodbye, they close the door, and he's walking over to his carriage and his horse, and his boot gets stuck in the mud. And for the life of him, he can't get his boot out. And they had sort of a makeshift window, not like the kind with glass that we have, more like a hole in the wood with a shutter. And so he could hear the conversation. And the children were wondering, now that Shabbat is over, they said, Papa, who was that man? And the father said, didn't you know that was Elijah the prophet? And the man knew that he wasn't destined to meet the prophet. He was destined to be like the prophet. He was looking for a blessing to bless his already rich life. And what the rabbi was trying to communicate to him was what God wants for him to do is to bless somebody else's life. To be like Elijah and bless others. You know, I want to talk to you about 18 insights that come from the scriptures about the prophet like Moses. Number one, just as there were 400 years of silence before the Lord sent Moses to deliver Israel from the bondage of slavery, so also there were 400 years of silence before the Lord sent his own son Yeshua to deliver Israel from the bondage of sin and death. 400 years, no prophecy, no action. It was like, is he listening? 400 years both times. Number two, both Moses and Yeshua were sent from God. Exodus 3:10, God sends Moses. John 8:42 declared that Yeshua was sent from God. Number three, both Moses and Yeshua were Israelites. And a whole bunch of scriptures on that. Now, but I want to note that saying they were Israelites is no small thing. You're like, yeah, okay. No, not yeah, okay. This is big stuff. Being that Yeshua was from the people of Israel is a major thing. And let me tell you why. We have challenges in this world today. Challenges. And one of the challenges that we have is that Muslims claim that Muhammad is the prophet Moses referred to here in this very passage in Deuteronomy 18. They use that same text and they say they're referring to Muhammad, which is obviously incorrect since the Messiah must be an Israelite. Remember Deuteronomy 18, it said, from among your brothers. Number four, both had faithful Jewish parents, both of them. Number five, both were under a foreign rule. Number six, both were threatened by wicked kings. Number seven, both Moses and Yeshua spent their early years in Egypt miraculously protected from those who sought their lives. Number eight, both Moses and Yeshua were sent from a mountain of God to free Israel. Moses was sent from physical Mount Sinai. Yeshua was sent from a spiritual Mount Zion in heaven. That's Hebrews chapter 12, verse 22. Hebrews 12, verse 22. He was sent from spiritual Mount Zion in heaven. Number nine, both were initially rejected by their Israeli brothers. Number 10, both were accepted by the Gentiles. Moses by the Midianites, Exodus 2, 14 to 22. And Moses was also accepted by the mixed multitude who came with Israel when they left Egypt, Exodus 12, verse 38. Yeshua was accepted by the entire world, Acts 10, verse 45, and 1 Timothy 3:16. Number 11, both were criticized by their own families. Numbers 12:1, Mark 3, verse 20 and 21. Number 12, both knew God panim lepanim, face to face. Face to face. The Father spoke directly to Moses, and Yeshua and all other prophets received their revelation by visions or dreams. And both Moses and Yeshua were authoritative spokesmen for God. They spoke with authority. Both were teachers. Both were faithful to God. Number 15, both performed power of God miracles unparalleled in the world. You think of miracles of Moses, you don't think, hey, he threw some dice and they changed colors or something. No, you're thinking big stuff, right? Fire from the sky and locusts and the Red Sea parting and Israel crying. Big stuff. You think of Yeshua, big stuff. You don't tend to think of the other prophets that way, do we? I don't. I mean, each one of them did wonderful miracles, but nothing like Moses, certainly nothing like Yeshua. Moses parts the water, Yeshua walks on top of it. Both fasted for 40 days in the desert, in the wilderness. Number 17, just as Moses initiated the Passover as the means by which that angel of death would pass over the children of Israel under the blood of the lamb on their doorposts, so Yeshua offered himself as the Passover lamb at God who takes away the sins of the world, John 1:29. Number 18 things on the 18th of the 18th year. Both their faces shone with the glory of God. Moses on Mount Sinai, Exodus 34 and 5, and Yeshua on Mount of Transfiguration, Matthew 17, verse 2. Now, a question arises. Let me see if I have a slide for this next stuff here. Nope, not ready for you yet. Okay. How was Messiah a prophet like Moses? I've gone into some details, but I want to sum up this for you. Like Moses, Yeshua was a son of Israel. He was a leader. He was a prophet. He was a lawgiver. He was a deliverer. He was a teacher and a mediator between God and man. A speaker of the word of God and a servant and shepherd of the people. Both Moses and Messiah are born in a time of national bondage. Both redeemers appear after Israel waits generations for redemption. Both redeemers are destined to break the bondage of Israel and lead her into the promised land. Both perform unparalleled signs and wonders to validate their ministry. Why is he talking about all this stuff? I'm preparing you. I'm equipping you. Most of you, if you don't have a Jewish family member or friend, you have a coworker. There's somebody out there that doesn't know Yeshua. This message is designed to help you talk to them. And on this very video, when I end this message, I plan on sending a message to them. Both Moses and Yeshua act in the role of lawgiver and a singular authority of God's law. Both fill the role of intercessor between God and the nation. Both do the work of reconciliation, renewing God's covenant relationship with Israel when that covenant is compromised. And God doesn't compromise the covenant. It's humans that do that. Moses was unlike all other prophets because God spoke directly to him, conversationally, without riddles, without mysteries. And because of this unique level of revelation, when Moses spoke as a prophet, his voice was heard as the equivalent to the voice of God. You may say, wait a minute, what? The Lord said to Moses, Exodus 4, verse 16, you will be like God. You will be like God. No other prophet in the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, attained the level of prophecy in which Moses operated. You know, in the book of Acts, chapter 15, 21, James, the elders of the community in Jerusalem, kind of world Yeshua headquarters, they decided, they had a discussion, and they decided to write a letter to the Gentile believers, telling them to abstain from 4 things that were polluted by idols, that were strangled, abstaining from blood and from fornication. But they added this thing. They said in verse 21 of Acts 15, for from ancient times they have had Moses preached in the synagogues every Sabbath. Why are they telling this to the Gentiles? So that they can go and learn about the foundations of their faith. Because right now they've got Yeshua, but they don't understand the background. Can you imagine? They're talking with a Jewish believer and they say, wow, I mean, you've attained all this. This is wonderful. You remind me of Moses a little bit. And they're like, oh, thank you. Who's Moses? They had to go and learn about it. What do you think? They were teaching it in the Greek pagan temples or the Roman pagan temples? They didn't. So they had to go and learn it. Where would they learn? They would go into the synagogue. In the synagogue? Yeah. Don't you think they were already there? For from ancient times they, letters to the Gentiles, they have had Moses preached in the synagogues every Sabbath. So why are they writing this letter? You see, when Paul, on his journey, travels throughout the Greek and Roman world, his first stop is almost always the synagogue. And his speech is almost always beginning the same. To you, my brothers, the Jewish people, and to you God-fearing Gentiles. They're already in the synagogue. He doesn't have to say, well, let me speak to the Jews here. Then he'll go out of the synagogue and go to the market square and round up some Gentiles and talk to them. They were all in the synagogue. You know, the writer of the book of Hebrews, though, he shows us something that's really interesting. He shows us that Messiah's revelation supersedes that of Moses. Messiah is like Moses in that he alone speaks directly for the Father in heaven. Let's look at Hebrews chapter 3 in verses 1 through 6 says, Therefore, brothers whom God has set apart, who share in the call from heaven, think carefully about Yeshua, whom we acknowledge publicly as God's emissary, and Kohen Gadol, high priest. He was faithful to God who appointed him, just as Moses was faithful in all God's house. But Yeshua deserves more honor than Moses, just as the builder of the house deserves more honor than the house. For every house is built by someone, but the one who built everything is God. And also Moses was faithful in all God's house, as a servant giving witness to things God would divulge later. But the Messiah, as son, was faithful over God's house. And we are that house of his, provided we hold firmly to the courage and confidence inspired by what we hope for. How many of you, like me, have tried, even for years, to share the good news of Messiah Yeshua with family, friends, co-workers, even strangers we meet along the way? And in much of the time, it seems to us as if it's no use. I mean, they either ignore us, they poke fun at us, they call us things like religious fanatics or holy rollers. I mean, this happens even in my own family. They call me a holy roller. So I think you got the wrong denomination, but okay. Anyway, it seems especially true among Jews, though, doesn't it? Have you tried? It seems that, you know, more Gentiles are being won to the faith and denominational or sect, if you will, of Messianic Judaism than Jews are. There's less than 1% in the world of Jews who actually believe that Yeshua is the Messiah. It's a tiny number, 1%. They're not easy. My people are tough. They're jaded from youth to reject Yeshua as Messiah, that he is the Christian God, a false God. Well, let me tell you something. I enjoy learning about many things. It's one of the things I enjoy. I like to learn new things, to experience new things. And one of my favorite things to learn about, other than God's Word, is the beauty of God's creation. And I was learning recently about the giant bamboo trees in Asia. I don't know if you know about them, but they have, you know, there's many, many different versions of bamboo that grow in different sizes and widths. They're different sizes and heights. But the giant bamboo tree of Asia is like no other tree in the world. Bamboos include some of the fastest growing plants, according to Wikipedia, in the world. Certain species of bamboo can grow 3 feet within a 24-hour period at a rate of almost 1.6 inches an hour. That's a growth of around 1 inch every 40 minutes. Giant bamboos are the largest members of the grass family. Bamboos are of notable economic and cultural significance in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Asia, being used for building materials as a food source and as a versatile raw product. Bamboo has a higher specific compressive strength than wood. Those of you who are in or related to a construction trade might relate to this. It has a higher compressive strength than wood, brick, or concrete, and a specific tensile strength that rivals steel. The fact is that when the seed is planted, though, the tree farmers fertilize and water the trees for 4 years without a sprout or bud from the ground. Every year they're watering and fertilizing and taking care, and you know what's coming out of the ground? Nothing. They would say in Yiddish, "Gunisht," nothing. But the 5th year, the bamboo tree comes into sight, moving faster than any tree in the world, growing up to 98 feet tall is the highest record, in all of about 5 weeks. 98 feet tall is the record, and some of them don't grow that high, but the giant bamboo trees can grow up to that and are almost 12 inches, in their diameter. And in 5 weeks. So 4 years you're waiting around, and all of a sudden, boom! It's like Jack and the Beanstalk. You plant the bean, cause the water, and all of a sudden, giants on top. The bamboo tree is a good example of our own lives. I like this example because how we wait for things that don't seem to come. How we share the good news of Yeshua with many who never seem to accept him. But then, whoa, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they believe. The man who witnessed to me when I was 18 years old, he never knew that I would eventually come to faith. He never knew. He did his best. He planted the seed. And I moved on. And he moved on. I never saw him or spoke to him again. I met him in the army. He was a chaplain. He went his way and I went mine. Some months later, I was transferred back stateside from Germany. I never bumped into him again. He never knew. Some of you might bump into people who were not believers when you met them. And then you bump into them years later and they are. And sometimes it'll take 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, doesn't matter. Even if we who witnessed Yeshua never get to know if the seed that we planted bore any fruit, it's the Ruach who does the watering. It's the Spirit that waters this seed. God is making that tree grow 90 feet in 5 weeks. God is feeding and watering the seed of faith that you planted. And it's God himself who would choose the exact time for that person's tree of faith to grow 98 feet tall. Jeremiah 17, verse 7 and 8. I'm almost done with my message here. It says, "Blessed is the one who trusts in Adonai, whose confidence is in Adonai, for he will be like a tree planted by the waters, spreading out its roots by a stream. It has no fear when heat comes, but its leaves will be green. It does not worry in a year of drought, nor depart from yielding its fruit." Now, to all my non-believing Jewish brothers. I know this is live on Facebook. You're watching this or will be watching it. To all my non-believing Jewish brothers, I mean, you don't believe that Yeshua is the Messiah. Let me tell you something. By foretelling the Messiah, the prophet like Moses, and instructing us to heed him, to listen to him, the Torah grants full authority to Messiah Yeshua. Messiah Yeshua is indeed the prophet like Moses, faithful over all his house. And we are that house of his. That's the message today. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.